Seaboard, roughly 80,000 units, and a bunch of retail as well. Next slide, please. Also a part of the Bozzuto Group is Bozzuto Development. We have an in-house development firm that the management company then will manage and operate. Bozzuto Construction Company builds those properties as well as acts as a third-party GC for outside clients. And we also have a home building division for single-family homes and condos. Next slide, please. So a couple of commitments that are kind of timely and worth sharing in the context of this conversation. 5 years ago, we committed to a 3% energy reduction year over year across our managed portfolio. We have achieved that 4 out of 5 years. Actually just submitted our 5th Energy Star Partner of the Year award application about 2 hours ago. And the results were great there. We have committed to increasing diversion rate in our waste streams. We have committed to the RE100, so looking at 100% renewable electricity across all operations by 2040. Combination of on-site renewables and REC purchases as we continue to crack that, try to figure out how to crack that nut in multifamily and mixed-use properties. And we are also part of the Department of Energy Better Buildings Challenge, looking at reducing energy and waste, and aggressively pursue Energy Star certifications and other achievements wherever possible. Next slide, please. So just quickly, accomplishments, again, touched on the Energy Star Partner of the Year. We're the first and only multifamily management company to achieve that. We are pushing 100 Energy Star certifications since it became available to multifamily in 2015. And really started diving headfirst over the last couple of years into green and, healthy building certifications such as Fitwell and Well. And next slide, please. Oh, one more. And so I wanted to share this one to kind of give the current landscape in which Bozzuto operates. We are a third-party fee manager with 80 individual client groups that we manage properties for, many of which are institutional investment funds. So looking across our portfolio, we have significant jurisdictional mandates and ownership mandates for driving not only energy efficiency, but ESG metrics across the board. And so that is really, shifting how we view operations and design at our company. So with that, I'll hand it over to the next panelist. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks, Pete. I'm Ryan Schwabenbauer. I'm the Director of Sustainability at St. John Properties. They're very happy to be here today and speaking about net zero, because I think as I think of organizations in the area that can work towards achieving net zero, I think we have them here. We have ULI and we have the AIA. There's no better place to start on this mission. A little bit about myself. I've been at St. John Properties for 4 years. And overall, I got 15 years of lead in sustainability experience. But my background's in finance, and I'm kind of stricken with the fact that I had this passion for sustainability, but my mind, it thinks in finance, it thinks in business management, and it's kind of interesting because I can see a lot of value out there in this space, in this high performance building space. And one of the things that's important is that we make sure that we look at that long-term value. Net zero, net zero, I don't even like the sound of net zero. I like net positive sounds better. I mean, if you're going to get to zero, you might as well just go a little bit further and get to net positive. I would like to say that right now our company's working towards that, but it's a far out vision. So but high performance building, I see the value in that, and I'm encouraged to start looking towards the net zero, net positive space. Next slide, please. So St. John Properties, it is, I'm happy to say that I've had some sustainability success here. We're able to do a lot. It's a 50-year-old, well, it's coming up on 50 years. We're going to be a 50-year-old company next year. The majority of our commercial and warehouse and office and some residential holdings, I'd say 80% are in the Maryland, DC area, and we've spread out across the country. I'm very proud to be the #1 best place to work in Baltimore. Just got that award, and hopefully sustainability played a part in that. Move on to the next slide, please. Our sustainability program, I would say that our sustainability program, it's only about 10 years old when it got launched, and we've hit, I think we've hit some nice pace lately. We started doing LEED certifications on our new construction, and pretty proud last year to hit 50 LEED certifications, and we're looking at numbers here. So 50 LEED certifications, we celebrated that, but just a few weeks ago we hit 80. So if you look at that timeline, we're really moving fast, and it also most of the certifications are managed in-house, although a lot of partners have contributed to get us to where we are today. And one of the things that having some sustainability background in-house, it really affects our existing buildings as well, because our new construction, we have a sustainable type of process to go through, based on LEED, which is our framework. But I think our existing buildings probably benefit the most because, most of our properties are existing buildings. They're not part of that 50 or 80 certifications. The majority of our portfolio is existing buildings, and they need some help too. So it's helpful to have that presence. And one of the ways that we've found this recent success and is what I call, like, we start with a project, and because we have a similar building type, and it ends up turning into a process. We're looking at every building is more of a process, a sustainable process. But one of the things that I'm challenged with is to make sure that we kind of arrive at a purpose. Like, how do I make sure I instill in my company this, as we have these achievements, how can I show that purpose? How can I make everyone in my company feel that same purpose? And that's what I'm pushing towards right now. Well, looking forward to this panel, everyone.
All right, so we're having a little bit of an interesting time because Christian is having some tech issues. So we're gonna scroll through these to Marta, and then we're gonna come back, I hope.
All right. Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you to AIA Baltimore and ULI Baltimore for having me today. As a little introduction, my name is Marta Shantz. I'm the Senior Vice President for the Urban Land Institute's Greenprint Center for Building Performance, and ULI is headquartered in the DC area, so I'm not far from you all. And you likely know this, but just to level set, ULI is a real estate industry group, global. We've got over 45,000 individual members worldwide, with the mission of the responsible use of land and sustaining and thriving communities. And one thing that's kind of unique about ULI is that we don't lobby. And so instead, we put a lot of focus and attention on thought leadership and research. And the Greenprint Center, which I run, is part of ULI's research arm. It focuses specifically on climate mitigation, making the business case for green buildings by tying reductions in carbon emissions to increases in asset value. So it ties really nicely to what Pete was talking about, and Ryan too, on the business side of things, really connecting the purpose of climate mitigation to the financial realities of real estate. We cover topics ranging from city and real estate climate policy partnerships to sustainable tenant fit outs to embodied carbon and everything in between, of course, including net zero and high performance buildings. So we can go to the next slide. In addition to our research work with the Greenprint Center, we have a community of practice, and it's also called Greenprint, which isn't confusing at all. And it includes a worldwide alliance of these real estate owners and developers who are listed here, committed to improving the environmental performance of the global real estate industry through benchmarking and knowledge sharing and implementation. And so we have collective goals for this group of over 10,000 buildings represented, 32 countries, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030. And just this fall, we announced an additional goal to reduce hitting net zero carbon operations by 2050. This is very much in line with what science tells us is needed, and also what is hopefully feasible in the real estate community. So if we look at the next slide, like, what does it mean to be feasible? Like, how do we think about high performance buildings? What is that business case? And Ryan and Pete talked about this a little bit. I think we'll come to it a lot in the discussions as well. I like to start by talking about reducing risk, because high performance buildings, like, that can include anything from securing a long-term lease with an excellent credit anchor tenant, making sure that your building can withstand a hurricane, or preparing for city policy incentives that may affect your building so that you're proactively ready, avoiding building obsolescence, preparing for investor demand. Like, reducing these risks helps attract investment, helps get good insurance premiums, and can roll up into a lot of different value adds for your building and your portfolio. And that's the way we like to think of it. The next item on the business case is the most obvious, perhaps. There's a direct business case for reducing your costs and expenses because you are being more energy efficient. So that also can be the reductions in the cost of labor and materials. If you don't have to change out your light bulbs as often, if they're LEDs, that can be thinking about reducing operating expenses on your utilities with energy and water and waste. All of that rolls up to improve your operating expenses, which ties to your net operating income being better and increasing your asset value. So that one is perhaps the most obvious, but not the only one, because while costs are important, revenue is maybe more important. And so when we think about revenue, we think about how to make your product or your asset better than the one next door. It's this competitive edge to attract more tenants and reduce your vacancy. It's to attract higher rents because of more quality spaces, which I admit during COVID may have some adjustments there. Or just to win the competitive bid for an attractive development. If you can say that your building that you plan to develop is more sustainable than your competitors, there is a way to continue maximizing revenue thanks to sustainability and high performance opportunities. And lastly, another element of the business case for high performance buildings is just saving time and money. A lot of times, if you are working on a high efficiency or high performance sustainable building, you can sometimes get your permits faster with the city. You can sometimes get development incentives that improve your asset value and your development yield. And so those incentives and those efficiencies not only help on the sustainability side of things, but also just the operational internal workflow. Now, Greenprint members have found that reducing carbon and driving energy efficiency in real estate portfolios, it just makes good business sense. And so we like to drive that over and over again. But also, we know that sometimes it's not enough. And the title of this webinar as well, it talks about net zero and high performance buildings. And net zero, even as Ryan mentioned, it's newer, but it's still doable and it's achievable. And Greenprint set a goal for its Greenprint members to achieve carbon neutral operations net zero by 2050. So we can go to the next slide and think about how we look at that, because everyone has a slightly different definition of net zero. We set this goal in the fall. And the way we look at it is that a portfolio is net zero if it overall has zero carbon emissions. And so that includes offsetting existing emissions with renewable energy, off-site renewables and renewable energy credits and the like. But first and foremost, starting with energy efficiency, because again and again, even if it's not the most exciting, it is the most impactful and the most financially wise when we think about buildings and performance and the financials there. Then we think about on-site renewables to bring all of that local impact to reduce carbon emissions. And then we start thinking about green utility power and building electrification, which is a trend and a theme that we're seeing more and more, not just in California, but across the country. And then we start thinking about how else do we balance that energy usage and carbon emissions? And that's with offsite renewables, renewable energy credits and offsets. Of course, we can't ignore tenant engagement and the importance of having tenants on board for behavioral use and efficiency of activities. And then also we're looking at embodied carbon, because while our net zero goal that we use to define net zero just looks at the operational side of things, we recognize that embodied carbon is a growing piece of the pie for building carbon emissions. And eventually we want to incorporate that too. So we have 11 of our Greenprint members have aligned with this net zero goal. I think some of them are Bozzuto clients as well, which is a fun overlap. And so I'd be happy to talk more about just how we at ULI Greenprint see this business case, what our members are talking about, and how to keep things moving forward.
Awesome. And Christian, we're going to come back to your slides.
Thank you. And my apologies. Sorry to keep everyone waiting. My apologies to you, Marta and Ben, and the rest of the panel that held up naturally. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christian Spanhake. I'm with Brightview Senior Living. I'm on the development side there as a senior project director. And without the benefit of having seen the slides before, I will go through these. I'm sure that my fellow panelists have covered a variety of the topics here. So I'll give you a brief overview of what we're focused on at Brightview on the development side. So we can go to the next slide there. So Brightview Senior Living is a developer, owner, operator as well of senior living communities up and down the East Coast, generally operating from Massachusetts, Boston metro market down into Virginia and the DC metro market, and all metro markets in between. And our pipeline of growth, we're looking at 3 to 5 new communities in that market and new markets per year. So clearly understanding and implementing an approach toward high performance buildings is a critical component of our development pipeline. We can go to the next slide. So what we've instituted at Brightview is our own green building standards as the first step in moving down a path toward zero energy. As Marta mentioned, there are a variety of different definitions of net zero. So we've tried to boil that down and say our goal is really to get to zero energy, and that's by and that's both in reducing our consumption as well as offsetting with on-site green power. So just a quick run through the building standards that we've implemented. All of our new development includes energy modeling and commissioning. We also understand that the site selection and building orientation will impact the energy performance of the building, along with the building layout and the envelope selection, and then on into the infrastructure of the building, the systems, the controls, the operation of the building. That's the mechanicals and the lighting systems, everything that goes in there. And then through leaning out those and the energy impact of those elements, what can we bring in terms of on-site green power to offset that consumption? In addition, to validate our energy modeling and to also hold ourselves accountable for the buildings that we're designing and to constantly inform our future designs. We do perform energy performance and utility tracking. We'll track our power, electric consumption, our gas consumption, our water consumption as well. And that also serves back as a model verification to make sure that we are using and implementing strategies that the energy models are suggesting to us. That leads to the next slide, where we're working with a variety of different consultants, FSI being one of the ones that we've partnered with most recently on a variety of our Brightview communities and to develop our energy conservation measures. So we'll go through, once we have an idea of the building orientation, fast forward into when we're really looking at the actual components that are going to make up this building. The energy model will help us inform decisions upon how we analyze and select our energy conservation measures. That'll provide us information on both the simple payback period, the return on investment, so we understand if we're investing in something, when we expect that return on investment will pay itself off, and help inform our decisions. We're operating in a very tight materials and labor market. It's kind of been that way for the better part of a decade now. And so the decisions, the money that we have to make decisions with, we need to make the most informed decisions that we can. That being said, once we identify those, we're also pursuing all of the available incentives that are out there, whether that's federal, state, local, through municipalities or counties, as well as utility incentives to offset that upfront cost that the development is going to have to take over. and absorb into our underwriting budget. That's going to pay itself out as we turn the community over to our operating team. We can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, costs, some of the challenges that I think we're all facing. Cost is a big one. What is the return on investment? What's that payback period look like? How does that fit into our underwriting pro forma? What are the available incentives that currently exist? What legislation is in the works that could help promote future development? And I would say that one of the challenges there is we need it. Solar would be an example where a variety of the incentives that came out 10, 15 years ago have now expired. And so we need a new concerted effort to help implement those incentives so that the technology can be purchased, and the technology, if it's being purchased and being used, will continue to evolve. We can go to the next slide then. And so the next steps, as we look down the path, where are we trying to get? Really trying to find opportunities where we can incorporate on-site renewable energy, that's solar, PV, and wind, ground source, geothermal as you get maybe further up north and maybe not necessarily in this geographic region, cogeneration, which is combined heating and power, seeing opportunities there. Again, there is significant upfront costs that the development is going to have to absorb. So making sure that there are incentives that can help offset that, and we're justifying for our underwriting team the return on investment. We'd love to get to a point where we are zero energy, net zero communities. And then as we pivot really very quickly here, I heard on NPR yesterday, we've got the 30 for 30 challenge of maintaining land conservation of natural wildlife, carbon accounting, and as Marta mentioned, zero embodied carbon, what your operating team looks like in terms of how they're handling carbon. That's really ultimately where we need to go as well.
Alrighty. Nathan, will you turn off the slide deck? Perfect. So that should be a pretty good introduction to where everybody is. And I'm going to jump into questions. I also just put it in the chat for folks to put in their questions if they've got them. So I'm going to start with what I think is kind of a fun one. And this is a developer specific, so each of you speak to it. What sustainable design features are you looking to fit into every building project you do? And any of you can take that.
I'll start off there. So solar, in our latest iteration of our design standards, we are going to be designing all of our buildings to be, quote, solar ready. So depending upon what incentives might be available for a community in Virginia versus Columbia, Maryland versus Boston, Massachusetts, the incentives might dictate if we're actually able to afford to get the solar in, but we are building our buildings with the infrastructure such that if and when we have the funds or legislation allots us the ability to, we can install solar. So our goal is to have solar PV on each and every one of our communities pipeline moving forward.
Awesome.
Solar is a big one for us as well, not only in our development company, but our management side as well. You know, one of the things that we are wrestling with in multifamily, especially for Bozzuto, which is primarily Class A plus, is, you know, that competing roof space for, you know, the rooftop dog walk and, you know, Instagram perfect, you know, rooftop terrace and stuff like that. So, you know, how do we kind of make happy with delivering extraordinary places and experiences with, you know, these net zero opportunities and commitments, and you know, pairing that with battery and stuff like that. We have lots of load shedding opportunities, I think, throughout our portfolio, and you know, how do we get involved with that, and then you know, engage our resident base around it and make it something that is part of that narrative of living at that property and being at a Bozzuto community. And then real quickly, you know, something that we're dabbling with through a lot of our third-party clients is some of this really fascinating and fantastic smart building tech, where we have little sensors on every motor and fan and pump in the building, and we know exactly when something is going out of phase, or you know, it's proactive fault detection, and you know what that can do for not only energy efficiency and water efficiency, but resource management, service manager time and energy service contracts, resident disruption, catching leaks before they become catastrophic. I think there's so much there, and I'm working and fighting internally of making that case for, yes, it costs this up front to put in the infrastructure and the little meters on every single thing, but look at the long term of what this could potentially deliver, and not, again, it's energy efficiency and it's also resident experience. So just getting our feet wet there.
And then I'll kind of echo a little bit of like what Christian was saying about the solar ready, and not necessarily just solar ready, but I'm also looking for any opportunity to build our buildings in a way that they can be upgraded and they can be, and also the ongoing types of commissioning activities and monitoring activities like Pete had mentioned. It's so important for us, especially when today we're looking at a high performance building, and then on the panel we're also discussing net zero buildings. So a lot of the common, as a spec builder, we have a common building spec. Of course, there's certain things we're including in every building: our reflective roofs, our LED lighting. But what keeps me the most interested is, one, to be able to monitor those buildings as they turn into existing buildings, and then also our ability to simply upgrade, not have to tear up parking lot, not have to tear up roofs, and find a roof penetration we want for solar on each building.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing with ULI's Greenprint members as well. A lot of focus on not just the low-hanging fruit, but that deeper energy efficiency opportunities, and especially technologies that you can implement up front so that you have those savings from the get-go. Very sophisticated building automation systems with energy management, including sensors, as Pete mentioned, but not just on the equipment, but also throughout the building. So thinking about occupancy sensors, thinking about daylighting sensors, thinking about CO2 sensors as well for different ways to people count. That is all tying into this smart building future. And as dull as this may sound, like sub-meters as well, thinking through sub-metering each of the spaces to be prepared to have that more nuanced and detailed information in your systems about what's happening in each individual space.
So I'm going to tie a whole lot of user questions and one of our preformed questions together. Stick with me for a second. So your companies are out ahead and you're building better than base code. We also know that base codes are going to rapidly improve towards a 2030 challenge, meeting buildings, and then beyond that, we expect to push even further. How do you make the business case today for being better than code minimum, and what uses, what tools you're using, incentives and others, or higher rents, or continue down that, like Marta had a whole slide on it. And as codes rapidly improve, are you also going to see a business case for rapidly improving?
We're seeing a lot of this tied to risk. The idea that if you create a building meeting code minimum now, it may be obsolete in the future. No tenant's going to want to occupy it. No investor is going to want to buy it. It may become a stranded asset of sorts in that sense. And so while that's a little more of a qualitative case, it's very much part of the dialogue in getting folks to pay attention to the value of sustainability.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, as a long-term owner and operator of all the communities that we develop, we want to be building as efficiently as possible. We have a unique model where we aren't sub-metered per apartment. Our residents, their consumption is included. And perhaps that needs to evolve over time, to Marta's point about sub-metering. But right now, that's currently it is. And in order for us to develop a portfolio that will sustain in value, we need to constantly be developing and operating as efficiently as we can. So as part of our base code, that's been with our business standard is to develop at least, our target is at least 15 to 20% more efficient than the dictating code. So that way we know in that 3 to 5 years, this code increases roughly by 15, 20% more efficiency. We know that we're ahead, and that during that period of time, that 3 to 5 years, there will be technologies that come out that enable us to move the needle further. 10 years ago, we were just starting to talk about how affordable LEDs are. It's a slam dunk. It's low-hanging fruit now.
Anything to add, Ryan or Pete?
I'll borrow, some talking points that I've actually gleaned from ULI, and are we? What's our exit strategy, right? It's one thing to build to code, but if it's a 5-year hold or something like that, is this going to be a attractive asset, not just physically, but energy performance and how the NOI of how the building is run impacts the asset value. Looking at shifting landscapes again, with for instance, Washington D.C.'s building energy performance standards, New York City's carbon, local, carbon reduction, local law 97, Berto in Boston. This is happening. It's happening locally. It's happening nationally. Are we going to be prepared for changing, operating mandates in a couple of years? So, it behooves us to be paying attention and, factoring this in as part of our development and operations process.
From my perspective, and from a company like St. John Properties that develops and builds and owns and manages these companies, or all of our buildings rather, it's a 30, maybe to 50-year investment. So for us, it makes sense to build what makes sense versus keeping yourself just above code.
Got it. So along that line, how do you make the financial case to your board, your president, whoever is signing off on final budgets, that you're going to build beyond code minimum? I understand the longer term holding and selling of buildings, but the day one ROI, how does that work for you?
And I'll jump back in. I mean, from our perspective, again, this is a 30 to 50-year asset. And what are we doing? What are we building for? We're building to house people generally. I mean, generally office. And if we start looking at incremental costs, especially as a long-term holder, that incremental cost for green building strategies, I think might give us our best return. So to cut that out is cutting our best return out of the whole pie. And kind of taking it onto the ongoing revenue side, people, all the businesses that we house, I mean, their employees cost, at least 10 times more than the buildings themselves. So for us to try to, be competitive on rents, that's always something that we need to do. But really the value proposition to our tenants is if we have a better, safer building, better air quality, it makes a lot of sense that the people cost is so much higher and so much more at stake there.
Yeah.
I would say for us, one thing that, I'm not intimately involved in the development side of business, but one thing I harp on over and over again is, the resident experience. If you go to Bozzuto's website, we talk about sanctuary. We talk about, again, extraordinary experiences. So, when it comes to designing and developing a property, that glazing, that insulation, yes, maybe it's getting its lead points, but it's also, providing thermal and acoustic comfort. Doing LEDs instead of halogen track lighting. How many less invasions of that residence space by maintenance can we, take off the board? Energy Star rated appliances and that sort of thing. So, really try to tie it back to like, this is, who we are. Let's not look at it through the eye of the lens of sustainability. This is core to who we are.
I mean, if you're making the case to the C-suite, the other thing to keep in mind is just the competitor peer set, where if there are peers or competitors in the market who are doing these sustainable improvements and showing that sustainability leadership, and your firm isn't, you are already at a disadvantage. So thinking about that competitive edge and staying with the market is another piece that's pretty valuable to those big decision makers. Also, though, like getting brokers on board to understand that tenants and residents want this and will pay more for it, and thinking about how those values like increased rental rates and increased occupancy, like leasing up the building faster, can be built into the pro forma so that those numbers are included and can balance out the slightly increased costs of more sustainable technologies.
And I would think we're approaching, you mentioned brokers and tenants are willing to pay more for it. I think at least in multifamily, we're probably approaching that point where residents are going to be asking, if you're not, why aren't you? I think we are approaching that point. So another thing to consider, and we're launching an internal study right now of a survey of a core group of residents to better understand, their views and understandings of this, and be curious to see what that shows.
Yeah, we do that at Brightview as well, Pete. We do the feedback sessions with our residents, also with associates, and that informs a lot of the decisions we make. And it was with regard to pursuing, we'll use LED lights, for example. You mentioned the invasion of privacy going into someone's home. In addition, it's the workers' comp claim when your maintenance guy slips off the ladder in the hallway, and the time that it's going to take this person that has a salaried position or an hourly position, and has got to go swap out bulbs coming down the hallway 2-3 times a week. That's dead time. That's you spending money you will have paid for LED in a month.
I would like to bring up how, with that beautiful, fixture in our, lofted ceiling lobby, how's that going to look with a scissor lift in it twice a month? And that changes the conversation pretty.
Yeah, no, that's great. So along that line, when you're working with your architects, you're looking for a higher level of sustainability. How do you give that picture, and what are you looking for an architect to respond back on? How much are you looking for them to push the envelope and bring new technologies?
From my perspective, kind of the way that we run it is I like the architect to come with everything they got to make this building as good as possible, and then we would whittle it down from there. Some things aren't going to make financial sense for our goals, but I think holding back is I don't think that's going to be helpful anymore.
Yeah, I'd agree with that approach, Ryan. We jump out and we want the architect. We work some fantastic architects and green building consultants, and we want them to bring everything they're working on. We want to understand what the innovation is, where it's coming from, where we're going, and then the budget's the budget, and that's going to drive some decisions. But I want you to inform me as to what's going on. What are the things I don't know? Where are some blind spots that you're picking up that we could pivot and pick up some, maybe so there's some low hanging fruit we were unaware of. So yeah, I think at Brightview we rely heavily upon our consultants to inform us, and they're really helping us drive Brightview's path to zero energy.
And a lot of that comes down to the initial sustainability charrette, right? When a new building is being planned, like having that as early as possible, having the architect team as well as the MEPs and everyone involved in the development like together on the same page with the same goals from the beginning. It's critical to having the process be as efficient and smooth and cost effective as possible. So that's critical as well, to bring it up front at the beginning, avoid change orders, avoid schedule delays from the get-go.
Awesome. So at what point in your design process do you start talking about sustainability? Is it CDs where you're picking final equipment coming into CDs? Is it earlier? Is it all the way at the beginning when you're talking about massing? When do you usually get in there? When do you want to be getting in there?
From my perspective, it's a constant because we continue to build. It's a constant conversation. I think I've got it good, and I'm lucky that that we build the way we do, you know, one building after another, that with a similar design. But to me, any advice would be as soon as possible. I mean, there's no reason to wait. It's just going to hurt you.
Christian,
And
there you are.
Oh, go ahead, Christian.
Oh, I was going to say I agree. You know, we're bringing on an energy modeler, our sustainability consultant, our green building consultants early on, site selection, even before massing. We want to understand that, we're going to engage those consultants or that particular consultant, depending on the project, as a strategic partner the whole way through design. So our design, we really want to understand right off the bat. We don't want to leave. I think, and 4 or 5, maybe 6 years ago, we were simply engaging an energy modeler in DDs, and that's helpful. That's going to inform your design. But by then, you will have missed all these other opportunities in advance of that. Well, so we started that a little bit earlier. Well, the earlier you realize you can bring someone in who's going to help inform decisions about how efficient your building can, should, and could be, that's an opportunity, and we're constantly trying to bring that in earlier and earlier.
The number of times that I've heard some of our members say, like, oh, we were at the point of substantial completion, and then the asset manager asked if we could add solar to the parking garage. Like, it's too late for that. Like, you can't just throw solar panels on. That's not how it works. And so unfortunately, buildings are not currently designed to be as future flexible as possible, like Ryan was talking about, or electric vehicle ready or solar ready, like Christian was talking about. So until it gets to that stage, having those elements from the beginning, again, is the time to do it.
Yep. Anyone else? Anything else there? All right. So this is combining a little thing from Klaus, where he says the budget is the budget, and if they're never adjusted to a higher initial cost, there won't be zero energy buildings ever, or at least not without carbon pricing. That's a whole other deep dive, isn't it? So you've already managed to say this is a higher cost that's worth it. What is holding you back from the next steps? What are your next steps forward? What's stopping you? Is it budget? Is it something else? Is it technical feasibility towards your steps towards zero energy or energy positive, as Ryan said?
I think for most of us on the panel here, we're all consulting or working on different projects. We're not building a widget every time. Each of our communities, each of our buildings is different each time. So they each come with their own unique intricacies and challenges. And so speaking of in that general terms, one of the challenges that we're facing is, as we have pivoted to building more urban infill and more town center development, we're going more vertical, which is great because of the density aspect of that, but that reduces the roof square footage and reduces our ability to really invest in solar in some cases. That combined with, so that's going to reduce our return on investment. There's certainly some sunk costs when you go to solar, again, as an example. Available incentives and the level of technology, and that's where I was saying in my quick run through intro was, if we are investing in both incentives for these technologies, the purchase of these technologies, as well as the scientific research for these technologies, they will improve. Until that happens, it's going to be a slow trudge to get forward to the point where where solar becomes a low-hanging fruit. It's just the type of buildings we're building. And so that's why we're partnering with FSI and HCM and BCT and all these great architecture and design firms to say, okay, well, let's think outside the box and let's do it a little differently. What if you have surface parking, just put canopies over that? So I think that one of the challenges remains cost, but it also remains, we almost are our own roadblocks sometimes by getting in our way and immediately finding why it won't work. That's just one initial thought that came to mind, because these are unique projects. Every single one's a little bit different.
Yeah, speaking of the budget is the budget quote, it's tough, right? Real estate is slow to change, very risk averse. I mean, no one really likes change. So it's tough to get folks on board with sustainability and these innovations and potentially added costs who just aren't used to it. One thing to think about though is how supportive cities are being right now when it comes to advancements in green buildings. A lot of them have some great incentives, whether it's tax abatements or permitting fees reduced or increased FAR. There are a lot of different ways that cities are incentivizing this that can also be built into the budget to drive those costs down. And then on the other side, cities are putting out some big carrots, like Washington, D.C., for example, is planning to have a net zero building code starting in 2026. That is 6 years away. And so for building developers and owners to think about that, be like, oh, well, maybe I should plan for that. Maybe I should figure out what that means and what that looks like on my costs and budget and be prepared. And so if folks are ready to prepare for those sticks that the cities are putting out, this is a way to think about that.
Yeah, we're certainly nudging our clients and internal development company to take advantage of these grants. You know, we have a couple of clients again that are ULI Greenprint numbers. You know, they're institutional investment funds. They are not going to be taking massive risks. You know, throwing their all the money at these projects with potentially unproven or unknown results for multifamily, for instance. But we've got a Heitman is a client of ours. They just made a mega commitment to net zero carbon, I believe, by 2030. I know the sustainability team is 2 people. They oversee a global portfolio, but my team found out about a NYSERDA program for incentivizing a retrofit feasibility study for electrification of multifamily buildings. And so we are proactively identifying these opportunities to just understand, what does this look like on paper? Can we do this now? Or, is this a, 2, 3, 5 year view? But just to echo those, Marta's comments, I think that those pools of funds and the celebration of achievements and, that nice sort of thing is like a $200,000 study that can turn into a multi-million-dollar grant to actually, pursue those projects. So, obviously it's not going to be available everywhere, but it helps start to move the needle and make those case studies and to show that it can be done in different markets with different building types. I'm all for it.
And like what Pete says, timing. It's timing. So what I think at this point is the market enjoys a net zero building, a net positive building, but the market doesn't demand it. And it seems like that's changing quickly. So I think from my perspective, I just needed to prepare my company that this is going to happen. Let's start looking in advance, kind of look at our design. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but that's kind of what I'm learning from this conversation today.
Awesome. So there is we got 8 minutes left and we have a lot of really good questions coming in now. Are there any technologies that you've looked at that you really, really want to do and just can't see working for you?
One of the things that a lot of our members have been interested in but haven't done yet is deep levels of occupant tracking, because they're worried about tenant data and the concern around like tenant health data or tenant just that level of data and personal information causing legal issues. That's been a big one where folks want to do tracking people's movement, not only for public health, but also for efficiency. And they're like, oh, you can't track our people. And so there are a lot of opportunities that have that issue that folks are frustrated by.
So that's a good jump into, we've got, there's currently, all of our talking points are about COVID. I think that's the way to say it. And in light of COVID and as it intersects with sustainability, do you see it as a yes and or more of an either or choice? You have to choose one or the other. You've got so much budget, or yes and we can do it in a sustainable way.
From my perspective, it's made our COVID response easier, having green buildings, having the ability to to tell our tenants, hey, we've been looking at indoor air quality, prior to COVID, and now we need to make adjustments, especially with ventilation and outside air, and having the capability to do that with a system that we're confident it's making those changes. As a sustainability guy, I hate to see the increased energy use, but those systems are allowing us to make those modifications much easier than if we would have went with the cheapest out there. So.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ryan there. And this is something that we will continue to investigate on our new builds is how can you account for the additional ventilation, the additional antiviral approaches without incurring additional energy consumption? What synergies are out there? So I think it's a yes, and it's just a matter of talking through it and figuring out the right technologies.
And we're seeing from the real estate community, if anything, folks are just doubling down on their commitment to sustainability. They want to show that that they are committed, that they are here for addressing their responsibility on climate change and the like, kind of that social side of things, while still thinking about optimizing energy efficiency for empty buildings, thinking about how to handle on the multifamily side increased occupancy all the time, and just being thoughtful about all of these new challenges that COVID has brought beyond the health ventilation piece, just how to handle this new normal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at, are we going to have these big club rooms with pool tables and stuff like that, and the communal gyms? One thing I'm excited about is, can we better integrate, fresh air opportunities with operable windows and more operable windows in amenity areas and management offices and stuff like that, and make that part of the conversation. One thing I'm a little hesitant about is, I'm all for operational changes. I'm concerned about, making commitments and having residents be like, I got sick in your building, I thought you were fit well. How do we approach that so we're communicating these things appropriately and effectively without over promising? So something we're wrestling with, I think, folks in the industry are as well.
Yeah, across all aspects. All right, I think we got one more, maybe two. As you're looking at sustainability, how do you interact with your tenants, the actual occupants of the building? We've got a saying over in the energy modeling world, tenants, they might not make your energy savings, but they'll definitely break it. So how are you interacting with your tenants? What information are you providing them? What information are you gleaning from them as you look sustainable now? And where do you see that going in the next decade or so as we take those big steps?
The area with tenants that ULI likes to focus on through our Green Print program is at the point of fit out, because that's where the biggest opportunity is to bring in energy efficiency and sustainability overall. Behavioral is important, and engaging tenants throughout is important to keep that persistence of savings, as we've talked about a good bit. But we really focus at the fit out and trying to encourage more collaboration on that front.
Yeah, we really need to set our residents up for success. Again, with Energy Star rated appliances, LED lighting, sensors, Wi-Fi enabled smart thermostats, well insulated, windows and doors, because our residents who are paying their own individual utility bills, 19 times out of 20, they can have their windows open and blast the air conditioning all day long if they want to, and we can't do a thing about it. So, how do we nudge them in the right direction? Again, I love the idea of these smart meters and invoicing opportunities to say, you're using, 90% more energy than your neighbors, or what have you. So we're looking for these opportunities to nudge versus, finger wagging and that sort of thing. So it's complicated.
Yeah, for us, we on the tenant fit out side, that's where we set our standards, and we try to. And I'm always fighting to set a sustainable standard. And the forces against me are trying to. Well, we need to be more competitive in our fit out. But luckily, at St. John Properties, we have our own tenant fit out team, and they're on board. They're on board. So we're setting standards that that. When we're coming out of the box, we give them a reasonably sustainable solution, and then we also have some lease provisions that require it also for them to continue down that path.
All right, so speed round, and then we're going to call it a day. What is the most exciting thing you've done towards sustainability in the last 5 years on your projects that you're super stoked you've started including on all your projects?
Energy modeling. You laugh, Ben, because we work together, but that's a fact. Joining Brightview 8 years ago, we were not energy modeling. We brought a lot of to our market. So Brightview's a market rate product. We previously were engaged in affordable housing, so we brought a lot of our sustainability standards from the requirements of CDA and HUD over, and we weren't doing a lot of those things. And to have an informed design is priceless. It really is. And energy modeling is a huge part of that. So,
awesome.
Mine's gonna be crazy boring, but benchmarking, just understanding what's going on in your portfolio is so critical to drive future decisions and understand what's going on and what can be tweaked, what's working, what's not. Boring, but a big one, I think.
Well, I'll do my best to try to be more boring than Pete, and that's by just really finding again the management process of the green building is what, when it wasn't that way, it was frustrating. I felt like we were starting over on each project, and to kind of get into a process, to me that is the most exciting thing, to see buildings kind of just come up the way you want them versus every detail. You got to fight for every green detail in your building. So.
I would close out with another maybe not super exciting one, but green building certifications. At this point, it's very weird to see a new building not have a green building certification, and I think that's fantastic that has become an expectation, whether it's LEED or Energy Star or BREEAM or otherwise. Having green building certifications be an expectation from the get-go is a good thing.
Awesome.
Agree.
All right. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for everybody, all the participants for tuning in to listen. Nathan, do you have anything to close this out?
No, I just wanted to thank the panel. This was a fantastic discussion, and happy holidays, everybody.
Hey, Nathan, you're going to post a recording of this, right?
I am, yes. Well, we have a YouTube channel, so if you search AIA Baltimore, we should have this up by the end of the week.
Woo. All right. Thank you all.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Happy
Happy
holidays.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.